Luca is cornered in a luxury restaurant by Don Rizzo's hitmen. To blend in and hide his face, he grabs Amara, a waitress clearing a nearby table, and kisses her. The hitmen, led by Nico Falcone, report back that Luca is occupied with a woman, causing them to hesitate. Amara Johnson's fingers trembled against the cold tray. Her right arm felt heavy, her heart thudding against her ribs like a trapped bird as she watched the men in dark overcoats enter the dining room. She didn't see the man in the blood-flecked suit until his hand was firm on her waist. Luca Moretti didn't ask. He didn't explain. He pulled her into a kiss that tasted like copper and desperation, just as the men with silenced pistols stepped into the light. The killers paused. They weren't looking for a lover. They were looking for a corpse. Amara's tray clattered to the marble floor, the sound swallowed by the sudden silence that filled the restaurant. Her mind screamed at her to pull away, but the man's grip was iron, his lips insistent against hers. She could feel the tension coiled in his body, the way his heartbeat raced against her chest. The men in overcoats exchanged glances. One of them, tall with a scar running down his cheek, lifted a hand. The others lowered their weapons slightly, uncertainty flickering across their faces. When Luca finally pulled back, his dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "Play along," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear, "or we both die." Don Rizzo's entrance was preceded by silence. The remaining diners had fled, leaving only shattered wine glasses and abandoned meals. He was a mountain of a man, his silver hair slicked back, his suit impeccable despite the violence that seemed to follow him like a shadow. He paused at the threshold, studying the scene before him. Luca Moretti, his most troublesome underboss, wrapped around a black waitress in a stained uniform, her eyes wide with terror and defiance. "Luca," Don Rizzo's voice was smoke and gravel, "I send men to collect a debt and I find you, distracted." Luca straightened, keeping Amara close. "Don Rizzo, this is a misunderstanding." "Is it?" The Don approached slowly, his gaze fixed on Amara. She forced herself to meet his eyes, refusing to cower. Something shifted in the Don's expression, not quite approval but interest. "What is your name, girl?" Amara, her voice came out steadier than she felt. Don Rizzo smiled, a predator's expression. "Amara, you have fire. Perhaps Luca is not as foolish as I thought." He turned to his men. "We don't kill tonight. Instead, both of you will come to my estate. We have much to discuss." The Moretti estate was a fortress disguised as a villa. High walls, surveillance cameras at every corner, men with assault rifles patrolling the grounds. Amara was escorted to a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment, all silk sheets and antique furniture that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Luca entered without knocking, his jacket discarded, revealing the shoulder holster and the gun nestled against his ribs. "This is insane," Amara said, rounding on him. "You can't just drag me into your Mafia nightmare because you needed a human shield." "I didn't plan it." His voice was flat, emotionless. "You were there, I needed cover. Now Don Rizzo thinks you matter to me." "And do I?" Luca's jaw tightened. He pulled out a briefcase, opening it to reveal stacks of cash. 50,000, take it, keep quiet. When this is over, I'll arrange for you to disappear." Amara stared at the money, then at him. "You think you can buy me like I'm some transaction? I have a life, Luca. I have a sister depending on me. I don't want your blood money. I want to go home." "Home doesn't exist anymore." His words were cold, final. "The moment Don Rizzo saw you with me, you became a target. Accept that or accept a bullet." Nico Falcone arrived the next morning, all sharp edges and suspicious eyes. He was Don Rizzo's enforcer, the man who turned problems into corpses. He stood in their shared bedroom doorway, watching as Amara poured coffee with shaking hands. "The Don wants to see you both. Breakfast, don't keep him waiting." The dining room was a cathedral of wealth, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows. Don Rizzo sat at the head of the table, cutting into a perfectly cooked steak. Nico took a position by the wall, his hand never far from his weapon. "Sit," the Don commanded. Amara sat beside Luca, hyper-aware of Nico's scrutiny. The Don asked questions, innocuous at first. Where was she from? How long had she known Luca? Each question was a trap, testing for inconsistencies. Luca answered most, his lies smooth as silk. But when Nico leaned forward and asked, "If you love her so much, Luca, what's her favorite color?" Luca hesitated. "Blue," Amara interjected, her hand finding Luca's under the table. "He knows it's blue. He just forgets I prefer navy to sky." She squeezed his hand, a warning and a lifeline. Right, baby. Luca's eyes met hers, surprise flickering before he masked it. Right, navy blue. Nico leaned back, unsatisfied but unable to prove the lie. Late that night, Luca came to their room with a first aid kit. His shirt was off, revealing a tapestry of scars and a fresh gash along his ribs from his earlier escape. Let me, Amara said, surprising herself. He sat on the edge of the bed, jaw clenched as she cleaned the wound. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. I didn't want this for you, Luca finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I've spent my whole life in this world. Violence is all I know. But you deserve better than to be dragged into my war. Amara's hands stilled. Then why kiss me, why not just run? Because running wasn't enough. He looked at her and for the first time she saw past the cold exterior to the exhaustion beneath. I've been hunted since I was 15. My father betrayed the Don and I've paid for his sins ever since. Every day is survival. Every person I meet is a potential enemy. When I saw you there, clearing tables with that look of determination, I don't know, instinct took over. You've never been loved, Amara said softly, only hunted. Luca didn't answer, but the way his shoulders sagged told her everything. Don Rizzo's announcement came 3 days later, a gala at the estate. Every major player in the underworld would attend. Luca would present Amara as his woman, cementing her role as his weakness and his shield. You need to look the part, Luca said, leading her to a private room where a stylist waited. These people can smell fear. They'll test you, try to find cracks. You have to be unbreakable. Over the following days, Luca transformed from captor to teacher. He showed her how to read a room, how to identify threats, where to position herself for the best escape routes. He taught her to hide a blade in the folds of an evening gown, how to maintain composure under interrogation. Why are you doing this? Amara asked during one session. Because if they think you're weak, they'll use you to destroy me, he paused, and I won't let that happen. Something shifted between them during those lessons. Luca's touches lingered. Amara found herself leaning into his presence rather than away from it. The pretense was becoming dangerously real. The night of the gala, Amara stood before the mirror in a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves and concealed a small blade strapped to her thigh. Her hair was swept up, diamonds glittering at her throat, borrowed armor for a war she never signed up for. Luca appeared behind her, devastating in a tailored tuxedo. You look like I belong in your world. There was bitterness in her voice. Like you could rule it. The ballroom was a den of wolves in designer clothing. Amara entered on Luca's arm and conversation stopped. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes assessing, measuring, judging. A black woman on the arm of one of the most feared men in the organization. It was a statement, whether she wanted it to be or not. Luca introduced her to crime lords and their wives, drug traffickers and money launderers. Amara played her part perfectly, charming and distant, warm but untouchable. But Luca found his attention genuinely divided. Every time Amara laughed at someone's joke, every time her hand rested on his arm, he felt something crack in the armor he'd built around his heart. The kiss that saved his life was now stealing it. Nico Falcone watched from the shadows, his jealousy a living thing. He'd been Don Rizzo's right hand for years, but Luca's star was rising. The Don spoke of Luca with grudging respect now, impressed by the man's ability to survive and adapt. It was the woman. She was making Luca human, vulnerable. Nico saw his opportunity. During the height of the gala, as Luca was pulled into a critical negotiation with a Colombian cartel representative, Nico made his move. He approached Amara with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The Don requests your presence, alone. Amara's instincts screamed danger, but refusing would draw attention. She followed Nico through a side door down a corridor, away from the music and light. Too late, she realized he'd led her to the estate's garage. 3 men waited by a black SUV. Nothing personal, Nico said, but Luca needs to remember his place, and you're the perfect reminder that in this world, everything you love can be taken. Amara's hand went to her thigh, fingers closing around the blade's handle. Luca will kill you for this. If he chooses you over the Don's business, he signs his own death warrant. If he chooses the business, he loses you anyway. Either way, I win. Luca knew something was wrong the moment he returned to the ballroom and couldn't find Amara. A cold dread settled in his stomach, the same instinct that had kept him alive all these years, screaming alarm. He found Nico's second-in-command lingering near the bar, too casual, too smug. Luca's hand was around the man's throat before he could blink, dragging him into an alcove. "Where is she?" Fear flickered in the man's eyes. "Shipping dock, warehouse 12, but if you leave now you'll insult the Colombians, the Don will." Luca released him with a shove. "I don't care." He didn't calculate the political cost or strategic implications. He simply moved, grabbing his gun from the coat check and commandeering a car from the valet. Behind him, he heard Don Rizzo's voice calling his name, but he was already gone. The warehouse district was industrial decay, shipping containers stacked like metal tombstones. Luca found warehouse 12 by the SUV parked outside. He didn't bother with subtlety. He kicked in the door to find Amara backed against a shipping container, her small blade in hand, facing 3 armed men. Nico stood to the side, gun drawn but not yet firing. He wanted Luca to see her fear, to understand his powerlessness. "Poor choice, Luca," Nico said. "The Don wanted you at that meeting. You just chose a waitress over $1 million deal." "Wrong," Luca's voice was ice. "I chose her over everything." The gunfight was brief and brutal. Luca moved with practiced efficiency, his bullets finding their marks. But Nico was skilled too, using the containers for cover. It was Amara who turned the tide. She remembered Luca's lessons about creating opportunities. When Nico reloaded, she threw her blade with precision, catching him in the shoulder. Nico stumbled and Luca closed the distance, his gun pressed to Nico's temple. "Please," Nico gasped. "The Don will forgive me, he always does." "I won't." Luca pulled the trigger. Don Rizzo was waiting when they returned to the estate, sitting in his study, a chess board before him. Luca expected fury. Instead, the Don gestured to the chairs across from him. "Sit." Luca and Amara sat, her hand finding his. "You walked away from a critical negotiation," the Don said. "Cost me leverage with the Colombians, cost me Nico, who despite his jealousy was useful." He moved a chess piece, a queen. "You did this for a woman you claimed to barely know." "She's not." "Don't lie to me, boy." Don Rizzo's eyes were sharp. "I've watched you this week, the way you look at her, the way she looks at you. I thought she was a shield, a convenient distraction, but she's become something else entirely." Amara spoke before Luca could. "I chose to stay, not because of fear or money, but because in this world of monsters, I found someone worth fighting for." The Don studied her for a long moment, then laughed, a genuine sound that startled them both. "My wife said something similar to me 40 years ago. I thought her foolish. She proved me wrong every day until cancer took her." He stood, walking to the window. "Nico was ambitious but sloppy. You eliminated a problem. The Colombians will reschedule, they always do. As for the girl." He turned back to them. "She's earned her place, not as your weakness, Luca, but as your strength. Together you have what most in this business lack, something to live for beyond power. That makes you dangerous. It also makes you valuable." 3 months later, Amara stood in the estate's garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. She wore tailored clothes now, moved through the underworld with confidence. She hadn't returned to her old life, but she'd brought pieces of it forward. Her sister was in college now, funded by anonymous scholarships. Luca found her there, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Regret it yet?" She leaned back against him. "Every day, then you kiss me and I forget why I should." "I love you." The words came easier now, no longer foreign on his tongue. "I know," she turned in his arms. "I love you too, even though you're a dangerous criminal who dragged me into a Mafia war. Technically, you agreed to stay. Worst decision of my life." But she was smiling as she said it, pulling him down for a kiss that tasted like copper and desperation, and now, finally, like hope. In Don Rizzo's world, love was a liability, but Luca and Amara had rewritten the rules. She was no longer his weakness. She was his queen, and together they would change the game entirely.